Imagine being trapped in your home as the power goes out. Lightning illuminates the darkened corners, and thunder shakes the very walls. But what if the storm isn't the only thing to fear? These are the nights where the shadows move, the unexpected knocks come, and survival becomes a race against something far more terrifying than nature itself. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're diving into 3 disturbing, true thunderstorm horror stories that will have you listening to every crack of thunder with dread. From terrifying intruders to unexplainable encounters, these stories will leave you questioning what truly lurks in the storm. Let's jump into the darkness together. Story 1, The Stranger in the Storm by Andrew Black. My name is Andrew Black, and I've always enjoyed thunderstorms. There's something oddly calming about the rhythmic pounding of rain against the windows and the occasional burst of lightning illuminating the sky. But after what happened last summer, thunderstorms have become a source of dread. I live in a small rural town in Illinois, where storms are common, especially during the summer months. My house sits on a sprawling plot of land, surrounded by dense woods. It's quiet and secluded, perfect for someone like me who enjoys solitude. On the night it happened, a severe thunderstorm had been forecasted. The local news urged everyone to stay indoors and brace for strong winds and heavy rain. I wasn't concerned. My house was sturdy, and I had stocked up on essentials earlier in the week. By 7 p.m., the storm rolled in, dark clouds swallowing the last traces of sunlight. I sat in my living room with a cup of coffee, watching the rain pour down in sheets. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. Lightning flashed every few seconds, illuminating the darkened forest around my property. As the storm intensified, I decided to call it a night. The power had already flickered a few times, and I didn't want to be caught in complete darkness. Just as I was heading to my bedroom, I heard it, a loud knock at the front door. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the knock came again, deliberate and heavy. My heart skipped a beat. Who could be out in this weather? I hesitated for a moment, debating whether to answer. Finally, I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously approached the door. Peering through the peephole, I saw a man standing on my porch, drenched from head to toe. He looked to be in his late 30s, with unkempt hair and a scruffy beard. His clothes were soaked, clinging to his thin frame. He held his arms tightly around himself, shivering. "Please," he called out, his voice barely audible over the storm. "I need help. My car broke down." Against my better judgment, I opened the door slightly, keeping the chain lock in place. "What are you doing out here?" I asked. "My car broke down a mile back," he said, his teeth chattering. "I've been walking in the rain for hours. Can I come in? Just for a little while?" Every instinct told me to say no. Something about him felt off, but I couldn't just leave him out there in the storm. I unlatched the chain and opened the door, letting him in. "Thank you," he said, stepping inside and dripping water onto the hardwood floor. I handed him a towel and directed him to the living room. He sat down on the couch, rubbing his hands together to warm up. "Do you need to call someone?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, I don't have a phone. It's just me." That struck me as odd. Who doesn't have a phone in this day and age? But I didn't press further. Instead, I offered him a cup of coffee, which he accepted gratefully. As the minutes passed, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. The man was polite but evasive. He didn't offer much information about himself, and every question I asked was met with vague answers. The storm raged on outside, the wind howling like a banshee. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely, plunging the house into darkness. "Great," I muttered, grabbing my flashlight. The man didn't seem fazed. In fact, he almost seemed pleased. He leaned back on the couch, a small smile playing on his lips. "Do you have a generator?" he asked. "Yeah, in the basement," I replied. "You should get it running," he said, his tone casual. I nodded and headed for the basement. As I descended the creaky wooden stairs, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The man's sudden change in demeanor was unsettling. When I reached the basement, I realized I had forgotten the matches to light the lantern. I turned to head back upstairs, but as I did, I heard soft footsteps above me. My heart pounded as I stood frozen, listening. The footsteps weren't coming from the living room, where I had left the man. They were coming from the hallway leading to the bedrooms. I bolted up the stairs, flashlight in hand. When I reached the top, the living room was empty. The man was gone. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. No response. I moved cautiously down the hallway, checking each room. When I reached my bedroom, the door was slightly ajar. Pushing it open, I found the man standing by my dresser, rifling through my belongings. "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded. He turned to me, his eyes cold and calculating. "You've got a nice place here," he said, ignoring my question. "Get out," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He stepped toward me, and for the first time I noticed the glint of a knife in his hand. "I don't think so," he said, his voice low and menacing. Adrenaline kicked in, and I did the only thing I could think of. I swung the flashlight at him with all my strength. The metal casing connected with his shoulder, causing him to stumble. I didn't wait for him to recover. I ran for the front door, flinging it open and sprinting into the storm. The rain soaked me instantly, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. I reached my truck and fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. As I started the engine, I saw him standing on the porch, watching me with that same eerie smile. I didn't stick around to see what he would do next. I sped down the muddy road, my heart racing. When I finally reached the nearest gas station, I called the police. They searched my house and the surrounding woods, but found no trace of the man. To this day, I don't know who he was or what his intentions were. But every time a thunderstorm rolls in, I'm reminded of that night and the stranger who nearly made my home his hunting ground. Story 2, The Lightning Knocker by Marissa Kane. My name is Marissa Kane, and this story still haunts me every time a storm rolls in. I've always lived in a rural area where storms often knock out the power and turn the night into an eerie void of darkness and sound. But nothing prepared me for the night when the storm wasn't the scariest thing outside my door. It was the summer of 2019, and the forecast had been warning of severe thunderstorms all week. By the time the rain started that evening, I was home alone. My parents had left for the weekend to visit my aunt, leaving me to take care of the house. I was used to the solitude, but something about the heaviness in the air that night unsettled me. Around 9 p.m., the storm fully arrived, with thunder shaking the windows and lightning flashing so brightly it illuminated the entire living room. I had been sitting on the couch watching a movie when the power flickered and then went out completely. I groaned in frustration, fumbling for my phone to use as a flashlight. The storm was loud and the pounding rain against the roof was like a constant drumbeat. That's why at first I didn't notice the knocking. It started faintly, a rhythmic tap, tap, tap that seemed to come from the front door. I paused, thinking it might be the wind pushing something against the house. But then it came again, louder this time. It wasn't random, it was deliberate. I froze, my mind racing. Who would be out in this weather? My parents weren't due back for another 2 days, and we didn't have any nearby neighbors. Cautiously, I crept to the front door, my phone's flashlight illuminating the hallway. "Hello?" I called out, my voice wavering. No response. I peered through the peephole, but the darkness outside was impenetrable. The porch light must have gone out with the power. Another knock came, harder this time, and my heart jumped. "Who's there?" I tried again, but the only answer was the howling wind. Then, as I was about to step away, I heard it again, knocking, but this time from the back door. My blood ran cold. The back door was on the opposite side of the house. There was no way someone could have moved that fast, especially in this weather. My rational mind told me it must be my imagination, or maybe something blowing against the door. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I hurried to the kitchen where the back door was located. The knocking continued, steady and insistent. My hands shook as I reached for the curtain over the window. Slowly, I pulled it aside and shone my phone's flashlight outside. Nothing. Just sheets of rain and the occasional flash of lightning. And then, just as I let out a shaky breath, I saw it. In the brief glow of a lightning strike, I caught a glimpse of a figure standing at the edge of the yard, just beyond the reach of the light. It was tall and motionless, its outline blurry through the rain. But what chilled me to the core was the way it seemed to be facing directly at me. I stumbled back, my heart racing. I locked the back door and double-checked the windows, making sure everything was secure. The knocking stopped, and for a moment, There was only the sound of the storm. Then it came again, this time from the side window in the living room. I didn't even want to look. My instincts screamed at me to hide, to lock myself in my room and wait for the storm to pass. But my curiosity got the better of me. Slowly, I moved toward the window, crouching low to avoid being seen. The knocking continued, rhythmic and deliberate. I peeked through the edge of the curtain, and my stomach dropped. A hand was pressed against the glass, pale and dripping with rain. It was large, with long, spindly fingers that seemed almost too thin to be human. The hand slid down the glass slowly, leaving a wet streak behind. I bolted, running upstairs to my room and locking the door behind me. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone to call the police, but the storm had knocked out the signal. I was completely cut off. For what felt like hours, I sat in my room, clutching a baseball bat I had grabbed from my closet. The knocking moved from one side of the house to the other, never stopping, never letting me feel safe. Finally, just before dawn, the storm began to subside. The knocking stopped, and the house felt eerily silent. When the sun came up, I mustered the courage to go downstairs. The yard was soaked, and the ground was covered in debris from the storm. But what caught my attention were the footprints. Large bare footprints that circled the house over and over again. I never saw whoever or whatever it was again. But to this day, every time a storm rolls in, I make sure every door and window is locked. And I pray that the knocking doesn't return. Story 3, The Basement Visitor by Jared Ellis. My name is Jared Ellis, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about the stormy night I'll never forget. It's something that still keeps me awake at night. The feeling of being trapped in my own home, the helplessness, and that cold, chilling presence I couldn't escape. It all started in the fall of 2020. I was living in a small, older house that I had rented in a quiet town about an hour from the city. The house wasn't much. Creaky floors, drafty windows, and a basement that always gave me a sense of unease. But it was cheap, and at the time, that was all that mattered to me. On this particular evening, I found myself home alone. My roommates had left for the weekend to visit family, leaving me behind to enjoy a few days of peace and quiet. The evening had started off typical enough. The weather was bad, a storm had rolled in quickly, and by 9 p.m., the rain was coming down in sheets, accompanied by howling winds and the occasional flash of lightning. I didn't think much of it at the time, just another storm to ride out. I was sitting on the couch, mindlessly watching a show on Netflix, trying to ignore the sounds of the storm outside. The storm had been getting worse, and every now and then, the power would flicker. But it was still on, so I didn't worry too much. Around midnight, the power finally gave out. A loud crackling pop echoed through the house as everything went dark. I grabbed my phone, trying to use the flashlight feature, but it died right as I needed it most. The silence that followed was suffocating. Only the storm outside filled the air, battering the windows and rattling the old house. I'd been through power outages before, but there was something about this night that felt different. Something unsettled me. I chalked it up to the fact that I was alone and that the storm was just so intense. But that's when I heard it. A bang, a loud, sudden thud coming from the basement. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. It was strange. The sound hadn't come from anywhere else in the house. It was distinct, like something heavy had fallen, or like someone or something had been moving around down there. For a moment, I considered just ignoring it. Maybe it was just the storm, making the house settle. Maybe it was the wind. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The air around me had grown thick with tension, and I could almost feel the weight of whatever was happening. I stood up cautiously and walked to the basement door. The house was eerily quiet, save for the storm outside. I placed my hand on the cold metal doorknob. The basement door was old, heavy, and usually creaked when opened. But it didn't make a sound as I slowly turned the knob and opened it a crack. The air that rushed up from the stairs was cold and damp, a musty, stale scent of old wood and earth. I held my breath as I peered down into the dark abyss below. I could barely make out the stairs leading down and the faint outline of the concrete floor at the bottom. The storm's flash of lightning illuminated the stairs just enough for me to see. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. "Is anyone down there?" Nothing. No answer. No movement. But then, another noise. Soft, deliberate footsteps on the basement floor. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. This wasn't normal. My heart began to race. I knew I should have turned around and gone back upstairs, but instead I did the dumbest thing I could have done. I took a step forward. I descended the stairs, my flashlight weakly lighting the way. Each step felt like it took forever, and the air grew colder with each descent. The darkness seemed to swallow me whole, and I could feel something watching me. A sense of dread crept over me, but I tried to push it aside, telling myself it was just my nerves. The footsteps stopped. I reached the bottom of the stairs and scanned the basement. Everything looked the same as it always did. Old furniture, boxes, and piles of discarded items. But the silence was unbearable, thick enough that I could almost taste it. I swept the flashlight across the basement, searching every corner. Then I saw it. In the far corner of the basement, crouched down, was a figure. It was still, motionless. At first I thought it was just some shadow cast by the storm's light, but then it moved, slowly, deliberately. A figure that seemed almost inhuman in the way it moved. My breath caught in my throat as I realized what I was looking at. It wasn't a person, it was something else. Its body was twisted, its movements unnatural. The figure slowly straightened up, and as it did, I could make out the shape more clearly. It was tall, gaunt, with long, unnaturally long limbs. It had no face. The area where its face should have been was just a blank void, dark and empty, like a hole in the universe. I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. My entire body was paralyzed with terror. The thing, it, was looking at me. I could feel it, even though there were no eyes to gaze into. I don't know how long I stood there staring at it. It was like time had stopped. My mind raced, telling me to run, to get away, but my body wouldn't respond. Then, without warning, it made a sound, a low, guttural growl that vibrated through my entire body. That's when I snapped out of it. I turned and bolted up the stairs, not looking back, not even once. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might explode, and I didn't stop running until I had locked the basement door behind me. I spent the rest of the night in my room, huddled in bed, eyes wide open. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever I had seen was still down there, waiting for me to come back. The storm eventually passed, and the power came back on. But I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stay in that house any longer. I left the next morning. I never went back to that basement. And to this day, I have no idea what I encountered that night. But I know one thing for sure. It wasn't human. And whatever it wasn't going to leave me alone. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more creepy stories. Which of these true stories gave you a chilling experience? Let us know. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that are real.